This week on Just Solutions. The US has the largest criminal justice system in the world, but it's rife with inequality. A 2018 report by the Sentencing Project shows racial disparity permeates every stage of the system. Black Americans are more likely than whites to be arrested, then more likely to be convicted. And countless unarmed black people have been targeted and killed by police officers. The documentary, When Justice Isn't Just, examines the many ways our criminal justice system is failing so many Americans and how it could be mended. It brings us the voices of people demanding justice. The producers of When Justice Isn't Just, David Massey and Dawn Alexander, join us today to talk about the film, its impact, and what needs to change. From Free Speech TV, Just Solutions. Well, Dawn, welcome to the show. We're hoping to have David join us in just a little bit, but we're very excited. Indeed, we're very proud to be able to bring this incredible documentary to our viewers, When Justice Isn't Just. And it really takes a dive in a way that I haven't seen other pieces do, a dive into all aspects of the criminal justice system and how, as I said, it's failing so many people. It's broken down into 3 chapters, and we'll dig into each of the 3 chapters, but you dedicate the documentary to the innocent victims that never received justice. And we hear about many of those victims in the film. We hear from the father of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old shot by police. We hear from attorneys representing the families of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, all black men and young men shot by police. And we hear about 7-year-old Diana Jones, shot to death by police in her bed while she slept in Detroit. And there are countless other people who have been shot by police. That's the first chapter in this film. And this film came out in 2016, so a lot has happened since then. But take us through your sense of the problem. We'll bring it up to what's happened recently with the Chauvin trial, but right now, where are we at regarding the killing of unarmed black people by police?
Just my opinion. Again, 2016 is when we did the film. Nothing much has changed. It's an epidemic, and I don't know if it will change or when it will change. But people like myself, filmmakers, protesters, activists, stay on it because it's got to change. People are dying. People are being shot for no reason. People are incarcerated for malicious reasons, not really anything that they really did that constitutes being locked up for 30 years. It's an epidemic, and we have to do something about it.
Did anything change this year with the conviction of Derek Chauvin for in that trial? People thought that was some type of tipping point, but there was also so much discussion about the fact that so many of these killings are caught on video. There is ample evidence, and yet we're not seeing convictions. And even if we are seeing it brought to trial, the fact that there even has to be a trial with so much evidence, that in and of itself is not any form of justice.
I don't think one cop being convicted, and even if they convict the other 3 or 4 that were accomplices, is going to change what's going on, because it's still going on. It was going on the day of the trial, the day of the conviction. As you saw down this, a couple blocks away, somebody was shot while the trial was going on. That kind of answers the question. It's not gonna stop unless we change the mindset. That's my opinion. Mindset of what people believe as far as our lives are worth just as much as anybody else's lives. And we have the same rights as anybody else to march, to walk down the street, to go to the store, to just sell cigarettes if you want to on the corner. That's not a crime that constitutes killing me. It just doesn't. It doesn't even constitute arresting me in my mind, but that's what goes on. I don't know how much we have to dig into the mindset, because I think it comes from history and just continuing the pattern and practice, as they say. But the pattern and practice seems to be just kill people of color. Why waste time? Their lives aren't worth it.
So much of the rhetoric around police reform, and we'll talk about what's happening right now with the George Floyd police reform bill, focuses on the actual nature of policing itself. And if you look to the professional lineage of modern day police, that goes back to slave catchers. I mean, the entire police system is built on a racist issue. And so if you think of it in that way, how on earth are we going to have any sort of reform when we look at where the police, modern day policing, has actually evolved from?
I agree with you. It's ironic that a lot of people don't realize that police officers originally originated in the Klan. That was the beginning, as far as I know. So there may be some historical history further back I don't even know about. But as far as I know, the Klan was originally hired to police. So if you start out with the Klan, how can it possibly be clean or real or fair when you start out somewhere where people believed in hanging people for just being people of color, for just being Black? You deserve to be lynched. How can that fruition into fair policing? It doesn't make any sense. So here we are, and people just seem to deny the fact that, oh, that's where it came from. But then if you look at Charlottesville, that's a great example of how they got out. People got out and marched, and other people, supposedly Klan people, came out and just said, oh no, we're policing this, and therefore we're just going to run people over or beat people off the streets because they don't have a right to do this, or they don't have a permit to do this. But who are you? It's crazy. That just things like that shouldn't have happened.
One of the attorneys that's featured in the film that represents many of the families like, the mother of Michael Brown, the families of Eric Gardner and Trayvon Martin, attorney Benjamin Crump, he said the rules are different. The rules are different for people of color, and particularly Black Americans. And that is true for every aspect of the criminal justice system, but particularly for policing. And so what you dig into in the film, particularly this first chapter, it's 3 chapters in the film, but the chapter 1 is Unarmed, looking at these killings, state-sanctioned violence, often against children. Because if we talk about, I mentioned some of them there, Tamir Rice, Iyanla Jones, there's no accountability for this. We're not even talking about justice. There's no accountability. So we've talked about the Chauvin trial and the George Floyd murder. Do you think anything will come out of that regarding accountability? I know there are conversations happening about trying to repeal immunity, qualified immunity for police officers involved in this, but it does seem that the structure of policing will shield police officers in these killings.
I hope so. I hope so. I think filmmakers such as myself will continue to highlight what's going on, continue to film, continue to get it out there, continue to say, look at this, continue to put it in your face. So America and people around the world, not of color, will continue to, because they do at times, just like when George Floyd was killed and it went live, people all over the world stood up. We have to stand up. We have to protest. We have to say, no, we will not tolerate this. This cannot go on. I have a son, and I know David has a son. We all have children, but particularly Black males deserve to live their lives the way that God intended. And that was not to be shot down the street like a dog. So, I keep on and do what I do because of my son and other Black men that are there alive and doing what they're supposed to do and don't deserve to be shot. It's just that simple.
The Black Lives Matter movement, of course, really was out on the streets and mobilizing so many people last year in response to what happened. And we've seen this happen over many, many months, more of a consciousness being raised. But we're also seeing this counter argument that is made when people say Black Lives Matter, that people in response sometimes say, well, all lives matter. And there's a really fascinating breakdown of that counter argument by Dr. Melina Abdullah, who's the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Los Angeles chapter. She's featured in the film. Take us through that when people say, well, all lives matter, how that actually is a very toxic statement and what that actually means when we're talking about Black Lives Matter.
I don't know why people perceive that as a toxic statement. It's just the truth.
Oh, well, all lives matter. When people say that has a level of toxicity, because that's denying that Black lives are more in a crisis situation right now.
No, I'm talking about Black Lives Matter. That's the truth. And people perceive that as toxic. It doesn't make any sense to me. And Dr. Abdullah, I love her explanation of the cartoon. I don't want to give the whole film away, but she talks about the cartoon and them coming to a house that's burning. And then a house next to it that's not burning. And they're putting fire on the one that's not burning. They're putting water on the one that's not burning. Why would you put water on something that's not burning and ignore what is burning? Black Lives Matter. We're the burning part. We need to be recognized. And the fact that once we're recognized, then we can do something about exemplifying the fact that, yes, our lives matter. So I try not to get into it. I try not to get into it as far as fighting that argument, because anybody that says all lives matter, to me, they can't comprehend the fact that Black Lives Matter is just trying to acknowledge something that's real and true. And anybody that just thinks about what that statement says, it's so simple. It's just so simple. And to say it isn't, or they don't, that's a conversation I can't have. I'm sorry, I just can't have that conversation, because I don't have the time. Don't have the time to waste to try to make someone understand something that's just simple to me. And I'll just go and make another film. That's how I deal with things. I just keep filming, keep producing, keep putting the content out there. And, if we get through the 3 or 4, one's not enough. 3 or 4, maybe, people will listen to others sometimes before they'll listen to filmmakers. They'll listen to family. They'll listen to friends. And I've noticed in the Black Lives Matters movement, because I've gone and marched and done things, and it's getting through. It really is, because I see people of all colors. I see white people a lot more than I used to, and they're out there. And it's wonderful to see that they understand that we're all people, but we do have differences. Our cultures are different, but we still all come back to the same thing: freedom, the right to live, and the right to just exist like the next man does. The right not to be afraid just to walk down the street. That shouldn't be. I should be able to just go somewhere and get out the car or walk down the street and feel like I'm okay. Whereas today, even as much progress as we've made, I still, when my son comes home or he goes somewhere, I'll tell him, call me. Call me when you're headed home. Call me when you get where you're going. And if he doesn't, I don't know if I can sleep sometimes. Sometimes, you just got to sleep. But most of the time, I wake up and check my phone through the night because he forgot to call or something, or text or whatever. I shouldn't have to live that way. but I do because I love my son and I want to make sure he's okay. Just that simple. But I have white friends that don't live like that. And it's just a matter of color. What's up with that? It makes no sense. And that's where we come back to Black Lives Matter. Mine matters too. I shouldn't have to live like that because I'm worried about my son.
Well, we're delighted to have David Massey, who's the other producer of the film When Justice Isn't Just, joining us. Welcome, David. It's great to have you with us. And we're talking about the racist history, really, of the entire policing system in the country, how it has its lineage going back to slave catchers and the Ku Klux Klan. And when we talk right now about defunding the police, this gets into the actual systemic nature of what is wrong with so much in our criminal justice system. David, we were speaking with Dawn about how much has happened and how little progress maybe has been made when it comes to accountability for police shootings since the film came out in 2016. What are your thoughts on that? Whether any traction is being made with these conversations around defund the police, systemic racism in policing in response to everything that's been going on? Do you see any progress?
Well, I do believe that the George Floyd live execution, was a game changer. I have to admit that I think moved the needle. When Justice Wasn't Just was 5 years earlier, and it's unbelievable because the crimes were still taking place, the unarmed black men shooting. I mean, even in our film, I think we went through maybe about 6 or 7 of them. And even looking at those, in my opinion, they're just as horrendous as the George Floyd killing. We had one where there was a campus policeman who shot someone he stopped in the head. A campus policeman executed a person in their car driving. The Walter Scott shooting, which we all are familiar with, where he jumps out of the car because I guess his back light was broken and he was shot 8 times, and the officer put down that he feared for his life, even though he shot him maybe about 40 yards away, running away with his back turned. So we in the Black community have been living with George Floyd incidents for a long time. In fact, I was nominated for an Academy Award in '92, and in my film, it was a narrative film. In my film, I had an incident of the police accosting a man, and this took place in 1957. At that time, it was funny because I was looking at a lot of Black cinema, and I noticed a pattern in a lot of the films. They were actually in a narrative format where they were documenting police brutality in creative filmmaking. And I believe that George Floyd turned the needle because I believe if the little girl hadn't captured the killing live and it hadn't lasted for 1 minute and 30 seconds or however long it lasted, if there weren't people pleading from the side, on the sideline, begging, I don't think it would have moved the needle. But think about that. Think about what had to happen before we finally got movement on this issue. We had to watch a man get executed live with people begging for the police to stop, while we had this policeman, arrogant policeman, kneeling on the back of this person's neck. I mean, it's almost was like written for Hollywood, but it was that type of scene that had to happen before people realized that there needed to be a change. Now, will there be a change? Well, right now we see that the police reforms are being stalled in the United States, in the Congress. It probably won't get passed because of the filibuster, which I don't want to get into. So if that doesn't take place, police reform, you will still have more incidents of police brutality, because until you make the policeman accountable for what they're doing in the streets, like I would be accountable, like you would be accountable, like Don would be accountable, then we're not going to have a change.
Well, as I said, the documentary, When Justice Isn't Just, it's broken down into 3 chapters. And I think it creates such a nuanced picture of how the criminal justice system is failing Black Americans, people of color. And I'd like to talk now about the 2nd chapter, which looks at Black on Black crime. And that idea of Black on Black crime, that's often used as a bogus counter argument when people say Black Lives Matter. Oh, yes, well, what about Black on Black crime? As if the 2 things were negating each other. You dig into it in such a nuanced way in the film, and you present this as also part of how the criminal justice system is broken, because the criminal justice system isn't serving people who are also victims of violence themselves, and how that violence is deeply rooted in systemic racism. Why did you want to tackle that as a particular issue in this film?
Well, I'll take that one, because we struggled with that, because we realized that some people misinterpret Black on Black crime and the justice system. But Don and I, care about the well-being of all Black people. The ones that are being shot innocently in the inner city. We're worried about the incarceration rate. But we're also worried about the police in unarmed shootings. So when we attacked that, we wanted to shed light on another problem that's going on in the community. Don's doing a documentary now on guns being flooded into the Black community, okay, which is a result of a lot of the crimes that are taking place. But unless you look at the entire picture of what's going on in the inner cities or in the cities or with Black Americans, I don't think you can address all of the issues that we are being confronted with. I know the unarmed shootings are making the headlines, but we should also be looking at the incarceration rates of Black people. They are totally outnumbering every other race in America. Why is that? You have to ask yourself a question. It's not because we are inherently violent, more violent than the other races. There is a system that is broken. And then when you talk about and you examine the crime that's going on in the inner cities, you have to look at food deserts. You have to look at guns being flooded into the inner city. You have to look at all of these issues. But like Melina with Black Lives Matter said, and I thought it was a good point, and we ended that segment on that, when she said, well, you know, every race kills each other more than other races. The white race kills more white people than Black people kill white people. Asians kill more Asians than Asians. Latinos kill more Latinos. And it might have to do with geography, but that's a fact. But I just think that, once again, Don and I was looking at the holistically, what is going on holistically within the Black community. And if we look at all the factors, everything, we're looking at incarceration, we're looking at crime, but more importantly, we wanted to shed a light on the unarmed shootings. So that's our point of view from the documentary, but we felt the need to address the other issues confronting Black
I felt in that chapter, though, it also showed how those inner city communities have been let down by the criminal justice system, insofar as when their family members are victims of violence, those crimes aren't being investigated. And in fact, there's a very poignant piece where a Black police officer is at a community event, and you capture this incredible moment where he's talking to a young woman saying, well, do you ever talk to your sons about the police and how they interact? And she said, my son is dead. He would be 23, but he was shot and killed. And there was no investigation into that. And that is the experience for so many people. So in addition to being subject to violence very often by the police, they're also not being served by the police when they're subject to violence in other parts of society.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, boy. That was magic. That's what you call a documentarian's dream. We had no idea that was going to happen. We did not pre-interview that lady. We knew nothing about her son. And to have, I believe his name is William Scott, the deputy, at that time, LAPD. I think he's moved on, right, Dawn?
Yes, he's chief of police for San Francisco now.
Right. That was just, boy, that just said it all. And I agree with you. That was a moment, but it also gave you another insight into what's going on. I mean, another one I thought was incredible. We had no idea that the district judge was going to mention the fake stash house. Yeah. I mean, that was another moment where they're actually setting up these crimes to put people in jail. And that wasn't coming from us. That was coming from a judge, a district judge who refused to handle those cases anymore. So I'm proud of what Dawn and I accomplished in this 30-minute, half an hour documentary, because we cover a lot of issues. But, you know, we needed to, and we could have covered more, but it was self-financed. So we did the best we could, but we felt the urge that we needed to speak out as filmmakers.
Well, it's a powerful documentary. We're very proud and pleased to be able to share it with our viewers here on Free Speech TV. That incident you mentioned where the judge, it's quite a jarring scene because he's speaking, it seems to be in maybe a kindergarten classroom to a group of community folks. So you have all of these, you know, images of, you know, young children in an education system. And then he's talking about how young Black men are being targeted by the police in these, you know, in this way, and how they're being targeted by the criminal justice system. And we started the show talking about some of the statistics about the overrepresentation of Black men in incarceration. They're more likely to be arrested than whites, more likely to be convicted. And when they are convicted, more likely to serve longer sentences. So the criminal justice system as well, it seems, is completely stacked against people of color, but particularly Black men.
You know, one thing that's consistent through all three chapters is the fact that Black men and Black people are denied hope. Everything comes back to, or is linked to hope. You know, hope about, am I going to be shot for walking down the street? Hope about my own community. And will anybody care? Will the police do anything about it if I'm shot? Back to being set up to be incarcerated. No hope. It's all about, it all links back to hope. So I don't mean to sound like Obama, but we got to give back some hope to people so they can exist in a fair and live way.
Well, I think that's a great way to end, unfortunately, this interview. We will be screening and showing and broadcasting When Justice Isn't Just. Our viewers can catch this, and we do encourage it because, as I said, it's an incredibly nuanced look at how the entire criminal justice system is failing so many people. But just in the last 30 seconds that we have, David, you know, from what Dawn's point was, do you have any hope, particularly when we are seeing that police reform bill stalling right now? The filibuster obviously impacting that, but also this issue of removing qualified immunity from police officers so they can be held responsible. Do you have any hope right now?
You know, I don't look at it in terms of hope. I look at it in terms of the struggle, and the struggle will always continue. It will continue in my generation, and hopefully the next generation will pick up the mantle until we have equality. Whenever there's injustice, there will always be a need to fight. And so I guess my head is too far into the struggle because I try not to predict what's going to happen in the future. If I did, I would have never saw President Trump become the president of the United States. So what, because I've never would have predicted that. So in conclusion, I think that the struggle must continue, regardless of what our status is at a particular time. But until there's equal justice for humanity, then there's going to always be a need for us to have hope, but also keep fighting.
Well, David and Dawn, thank you so much for joining us from Free Speech TV, Just Solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.